Jose Aldo is a living legend, arguably the greatest featherweight of all time, and that opinion comes from the current champion, Alexander Volkanovski himself. Aldo has been a staple of the MMA community for the majority of the past 2 decades. But sadly, the Brazilian announced his retirement later last month, after the birth of his son. Today, we are looking at some of the greatest performances from a truly majestic career. Stay with us. Let's jump straight in then. First up is Rob Font. We are starting off with a relatively recent one, as it signifies just how dominant Jose Aldo actually was, even right up to the end of his career. Coming into the fight, Font was on a pretty good run, having beaten the likes of Ricky Simon and former bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt. So when Aldo abruptly ended his 4-fight win streak, people again scolded themselves for writing off the legendary Brazilian. The fight itself wasn't even close. On the official scorecards, 2 judges gave every round to the former featherweight king, who is now competing in the division below. The other judge scored it 49-46. But some might say that solitary round was given to Font out of sympathy as, for want of a better word, Aldo battered him around the octagon for 5 rounds. Both men seemed to visibly tire towards the end, and it's no surprise given how much energy Aldo had put into the performance, and how much punishment Font had taken. But as the bell sounded for the end of the fight, there wasn't a single person inside the UFC Apex who wasn't sure which way the judges were going to score it. Aldo would secure the decision for the 31st win of his superb career, but would retire after his very next fight against Merab Dvalishvili. What do you guys make of Aldo's performance against Rob? Give us your thoughts below. Next up is his epic second fight with Chad Mendes. Stay tuned. For whatever reason, Aldo's second fight with Mendes has been somewhat forgotten, but it absolutely shouldn't have been. World MMA Awards, ESPN, Bloody Elbow, and MMA Junkie all voted this one as the 2014 Fight of the Year, and for a good reason. Both men gave it their all at UFC 179 in what would essentially be one of the best title fights of all time. The pair both brought it and left it all in the octagon, in a fight that both would almost certainly view as a career turning point. Aldo would be dethroned by McGregor in the very next fight, possibly down to how brutal this fight was, and Mendes would begin to drop more than he would win following the bout. Aldo proved that he was still the superior fighter, and showed that he was still able to dig deep when needed. Having won the first 3 rounds, Mendes rallied and won the 4th, which simply served to give Aldo a kick up the backside. He clearly didn't want the judges to remember Mendes winning the last 2 rounds, and brought the action hard in the last to make sure he retained his title. This was simply one of the greatest performances of his career. I mean, it was his 9th title defense, which in itself should be commended, as we just don't see that sort of thing in this day and age. What did you think of the second Mendes fight? We're talking about the first Frankie fight now. Stick around. Aldo took on Frankie Edgar back in 2013 at UFC 156 in his 6th title defense. It was also his 15th win in a row, and one of his most dominant. The fight would go the distance, but that only tells half of the story. Edgar had dropped down to featherweight following 2 successive lightweight title defeats against Benson Henderson, with one particularly egregious decision, and instantly walked into a title fight, which had only served to anger some of those at the top of the featherweight division at the time. However, Jose was in no mood to welcome Edgar to the featherweight division nicely, and put him through the ringer for the first 3 rounds. Frankie arguably won the 4th round, but much like the Mendes fight, Aldo came back to win the 5th, bagging a unanimous decision victory along the way. At this time in his career, Jose Aldo was arguably the pound-for-pound greatest fighter on the planet, so for anyone to go 5 rounds with him is some achievement. The fight would strangely serve to revitalize Edgar too, who would go on a 5-fight win streak after being outclassed by the Brazilian, beating future and past champions alike in the form of Charles Oliveira and BJ Penn. What do you guys think of this fight? Next up, it's the first Mendes fight. Back in January 2012, Jose took on Chad Mendes for the first time in his native Brazil, retaining his title before scaling the fence and jumping into the crowd to celebrate with his adoring fans. The fight would produce one of the most iconic moments of Aldo's career, as he knocked Mendes clean out with one of the best knees you are likely to ever see in combat sports. With just a few seconds left on the clock before the first round expired, Mendes had Aldo's back as they were stood up against the cage. However, the Brazilian managed to wriggle free, and as he turned to face his opponent, Mendes simply hadn't reacted as quickly. Seeming as though he hadn't registered that Jose had escaped, his head was super low, which Aldo recognized and took into account, launching a huge knee directly into the face of Chad, which had dire consequences for the American. Of course, he took a direct trip straight to the canvas, and Jose followed him down, landing a massive right hand on the way in. A truly magnificent knockout, the win would extend Aldo's winning run to 14 in a row and would send the crowd into absolute raptures. Upon his retirement from the UFC last month, Dana White would reference the aftermath of the fight, where he jumped into the crowd, as one of his favorite ever Jose Aldo moments, and we cannot agree more. What was your favorite Aldo moment? We have the Uriah Faber fight up next. Stick around. Uriah Faber was one of the UFC's biggest nearly men. The California kid was always there or thereabouts, but never quite managed to relive his glory days from the WEC, where he was crowned champion of the featherweight division back in March 2006. And in April 2010, he would come face to face with the one Jose Aldo in the same promotion for the same WEC featherweight title he had previously lost to Mike Brown. However, the fight wouldn't end well for Faber, who was absolutely mauled by a rampant Aldo for 5 rounds. One judge scored the contest 50-45, while the other two scored it 49-46 in favor of Jose. But we're not sure how Faber was given a round on reflection. Aldo showed up-and-coming fighters how to utilize leg kicks by attacking Faber's left leg for almost the entirety of the fight, and it paid off, as Uriah's mobility was reduced with each passing round. After the fight, Faber would say, "I trained a lot of defensive leg kicks, but he's really effective with them. He took my legs away from me. I was losing mobility." Of course, Aldo was just getting going at this point and would reign supreme in the division for another 5 years, following the UFC merger. What do you guys make of Aldo's brutal performance and Uriah? Pretty epic, right? And finally, we're talking Cub Swanson. Aldo's flying knee knockout of Cub Swanson at WEC 41 back in June 2009 was one of the best knockouts seen in the promotion up to that date, as the Brazilian demonstrated the true depths of his talents. The fight was actually a featherweight title eliminator and would also earn Aldo a Knockout of the Night award. With just 7 seconds gone in the fight, Aldo switched Swanson's lights out with a flying knee from hell, which the Americans simply didn't expect or see coming. As the pair came together after the opening bell, Swanson appeared to take a step back, possibly a level change to attempt an early takedown, or possibly to throw a left hand, but Jose had telegraphed it, in scenes which would be replicated years later, as Jorge Masvidal brutalized Ben Askren in a similar fashion. The Brazilian clearly hurt Cub, but didn't actually put him to sleep. Swanson was badly hurt, however, and he knew he was in big trouble. So, in a bid to minimize any further punishment, he decided to simply cover up in the middle of the octagon. Both Aldo and the referee knew it was over as a contest, and even Aldo refrained from throwing another shot at his opponent on the floor, as he knew the fight was completely done, which he really doesn't get enough praise for. One of the quickest knockouts you're ever likely to see. This one would propel Jose straight into a title fight with Mike Brown, and we all know how that went. As usual, thanks for dropping in today, and remember to tune in again next time for some more fun and games. Oh, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for some more great content in the future. Bye guys!